Hello there. It's just me, your old buddy Grizzly Jim, and I just want to talk to you about something today that I think, being honest, probably has affected every single archer out there at some point. I don't think I know an archer that hasn't done this at one point or another, and that's I just want to talk about dry firing your bow. Now, before we get rolling, there's just something I want to get off my chest, and that is you do not fire a bow. You shoot a bow or you loose an arrow. You don't fire a bow. That came from kind of more the gunpowder era, kind of talking about flintlock pistols and muskets and whatnot. Bit more in depth for another video at some point down the line, maybe. But yeah, I know film and TV get it wrong sometimes, but from an archery point of view, you do not fire a bow. Which is strange because you call it dry firing, which comes from sort of firearms where you would shoot a gun without a bullet in it. But that's by the by. We're talking about bows and arrows today and dry firing. Now, what can happen, or what does happen, is when you shoot a bow, you draw the bow back and there's a lot of energy stored in that bow. And what happens is when you loose the arrow, the energy is transferred from the bow into the arrow, and that's what propels the arrow downrange and hits dead center, and it's a great shot. But what happens if you shoot a bow without an arrow in it? All that energy that's stored up in the bow goes back into the bow, and if it's a recurve, a single string bow, that energy can crack limbs, it can crack risers, split limbs. There's a lot of energy in there that can cause a lot of damage. And if you're talking about a compound bow, it can be even worse because there's even more energy stored up in that compound bow. So it can be really quite catastrophic if one of those goes off without an arrow in it. Now, it happens to everybody. It can happen by mistake. It can happen by, well, no, I don't think anyone ever dry fires a bow on purpose, but there are a number of ways which cause it. The most common way of causing a dry fire, from what I've seen anyway, is when you are on the shooting line, you're about to shoot, you get your arrow, put it on the bow, somebody comes up and talks to you, and of course you do the safe thing, you take the arrow off the bow, pop it back in your quiver, the conversation finishes, and then you get back to shooting, you draw up, you haven't put an arrow in there, and it's gone. Big mistake, big loud noise, everyone looks, it's embarrassing, you don't want to do it. That happens. The other way that happens, especially with compound bows, because a normal bow, as you pull it back, the poundage increases the further back you go. Obviously with a compound bow, as I'm sure you probably know, it starts very heavy and then gets lighter. Now this can trick the brain sometimes, and it can cause a little bit of confusion, especially when you're coming down. It starts very light and then very quickly ramps up and is very heavy, and it can sometimes slip out the fingers and cause a dry fire. The other thing that can happen with a compound bow is due to the cams at the top and bottom, the little wheels that you see on a compound bow. If you are coming down, drawing down, especially if you're using your fingers, you're coming down, you put a little bit of torque in the string, you can do something called a derailment, where the string will pop out of the rail at the top, and that can also do a very similar thing to a dry fire. It's not quite the same as a dry fire, but it can be just as catastrophic. So yeah, that's something you need to be aware of. The other thing you need to be aware of is a partial dry fire, which is more, you tend to get more with sort of single string bows rather than you do the compounds. And that's where the arrow will sometimes slip off the nock without you realizing it. You're at full draw, you're going to make a really good shot, but the arrow has slipped off and you don't know it. You let go, you get a big loud bang, the arrow falls to the floor, and you end up looking silly, and nobody wants that. I don't want anyone to look silly. So that's just something to be mindful of. But my point is, it happens, and it happens a hell of a lot. And working in an archery shop, we hear about it a lot. So I'm going to pass you over to my buddy Ollie, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I mean, dry fires happen. We've all been there. If you've not done it, you probably know someone that has done it, or they know someone that's done it. We get it a lot, you know, whether it's in the shop, whether it's in the office, people coming in, customer service wise, but it's normally an easy fix. Sometimes it's not, but it happens to everyone. Nothing to worry about. We've heard it all. You know, it's some people will be straight up and just go, look, this happened, can we sort it? Some people, I think, are a little bit embarrassed. You hear all sorts of stories of how it happened or how it wasn't them, but they know, we know, you know, but we'll get it sorted. So it happens to the best of them. Newbie, pro, doesn't matter.
Well, there you have it. Like Ollie says, it's not a huge deal. It happens. And working in an archery shop, we hear about it a hell of a lot. There is an amazing group of technicians out there, and 9 times out of 10, we can usually repair something if there is damage. Even if there isn't any visible damage, you can pop it in. One of the tech guys can give it a once over just to give you some peace of mind, because it can play on your mind. It can give you mind games as well if you think there might be something wrong with your bow, even if there isn't. But don't worry, just give us a call, be honest, and we'll do our best to get it sorted for you. But everybody dry fires their bow at some point. It doesn't matter if you're at the top of the game or you're just getting started. It does happen. Don't feel bad. It's embarrassing, yes, and it can be expensive, but don't worry. All right, you take care, shoot straight, and we'll see you on the internet. Bye-bye. Referred to as, like I say, the dark side. Now, I wanted to know